I mean, I've always lived in two worlds. It's very difficult to juggle. You have to be really on top of things to maintain two different lives. It gets trickier when you're older because, when you're a kid, all you really have to do is you have to go to school, and so you have to deal with life at school and you have to deal with life at home. When you get older, you have to make decisions. I mean, the whole time I was growing up, I tried to always stay within that gray area, so that it wasn't very clear where I really belonged.
Generation 1.5 is a DVD project that aims to convey the experience of growing up as a 1.5 generation American. The 1.5 generation are people who came to the United States as children and were raised here by their immigrant parents. They are unlike the first generation immigrants who grew up somewhere else before immigrating to the U.S., and they are also different from the second generation who are born here. Straddling a gray area, the 1.5 generation struggles to stay culturally neutral.
As I was growing up, I'd have to say it started in kindergarten. First of all, the teacher couldn't pronounce my name in the beginning, so it all started from there. Kids, in the beginning they were a little bit immature, so, they'd laugh a little bit, but I didn't really mind. I was always strong from the beginning. Everyone would ask, what's that on your head? Why do you wear that?
I also seen, things happen to my parents where if they went somewhere, I could see people laughing about their accents and, and then eventually me growing ashamed of their accents or just, wishing they could just be like, a regular American parent with blonde hair. And so it was hard because I loved my parents and it was hurtful to see them be treated this way, but it made me feel ashamed of who I was when I was younger, not anymore.
When I was in graduate school, I did a research project on Asians on television. Not even the South Asians, because then there would have been only one. Asians. And there were 6. And of course that one South Asian one wasn't even a real person. It was a cartoon. It was Apu from The Simpsons. And I have mixed feelings about that, because on the one hand, there's an Indian character on TV. On the other hand, it's one of the most negative stereotypes of Indians that's out there. A 7-Eleven owner with that, lilting accent. It's what's often referred to. The taxi driver image, the motel owner image. But you know what? A stereotype is a stereotype. And whether it seems to be positive or negative, it still puts us in a box.
Once we moved to the United States, I think one of the most difficult things was the fact that during the Iran-Iraq War, the US was actually supporting Iraq. Both the US and other European countries had financially supported Iraq, were supplying arms to Saddam Hussein. They had met with Saddam Hussein. And so it was particularly difficult to not only be concerned about the welfare and safety of relatives and your country, but there was also this sense of irony because I was living and taking refuge in a country that was, in a way, responsible for some of the bloodshed. So this also created a lot of feelings of conflict in me.
I bought a new digital camera, and then my mother called me one morning and she wanted me to pick her up at work. I'm parked across from a subway station, so I decided to test out the long lens on the camera. I decided to zoom in the subway station, snap maybe 2 pictures. And this was literally, I would say, no longer than 10 seconds that this happened. I jumped in my car and I drove away. Came back from Los Angeles 3 weeks later, and my brother told me, an FBI agent actually, knocked on our door, and he opened and he asked him, that there were witnesses who saw that there was a South Asian man who started taking pictures. And my brother explained to him, oh, that's my brother, he just bought a new digital camera, etc. And they said, well, here's my name and number, please have him contact me. So I came back and he told me this, and then I thought, oh, that is just so funny. If I was an American, obviously nobody would have called the FBI. Literally 10 seconds, I take some pictures, and suddenly FBI is knocking on my door. This is the reality of living in America as a Muslim.
Assimilation into American life, it to a large extent depends on how old a person was when they first came to the United States. Obviously, the older a person is when they immigrate, the harder it is, I think, for them to assimilate and become quote-unquote American.
Dating was definitely an issue. They didn't really want me to date at all, but they put an age on it, which is 16. Friends would go to a movie or something and say, oh, I had a date and we went to such and such a movie. And I'd be like, yeah, I saw that movie too. And not really tell them that I went with my grandmother because I was allowed to date. Sometimes when I would like a boy and he wasn't Indian and he didn't ask me out, there was always that question of, well, does he not like me because I'm Indian or because he doesn't like my personality or he's not attracted to me? But that race issue is always part of the equation. And then there were, conversely, other times when I would get asked out by guys who seemed to specifically like me because of the exotic factor of me being Asian.
This DVD contains a series of documentary interviews and abstract metaphor videos which explore the various interconnected issues that define the 1.5 generation immigrant experience, particularly as a cultural and ethnic minority. Structurally, this project is an amalgam of a database of fragmented stories supported by text and abstract videos. These videos, or images, are juxtaposed with fragments of interviews that metaphorically illustrate the underlying issues. The stylized videos are my own interpretation of the various issues expressed through the medium of the digital image. If the individual is speaking about how war in her home country has caused a feeling of displacement to be part of her identity, I then juxtapose an image referring to identity as part of this fragment. The issues are not didactically classified as belonging to a Section I identity. Rather, I have interpreted it through the video as belonging to such a category. Similarly, the interview fragment might be about struggling to assimilate, and I illustrate the process through a visual such as sugar dissolving in water. Another example of a metaphor video illustrates how each ethnic group lives in their own enclave by showing drops of oil not mixing with water. As an artist, I am exploring the boundaries between fine art and documentary. However, I've taken pains to ensure that the aesthetic enhancements do not distract from the seriousness of the underlying themes. This DVD is programmed to randomize the stories contained in the database. Thus, each time the DVD is played, it will offer the viewer a different experience based on the resultant random narrative thread. The subtle cultural friction experienced by the 1.5 generation makes one ponder the future course of multiculturalism in America. My goal in this project is to create an aesthetic piece that makes the viewer identify with the feelings and experiences of the 1.5 generation and connect with their issues.